Hello and welcome to Islam and Muslims. I'm your host Ali. Today we'll be looking at frequently asked questions about the Islamic faith, where we look at one of those questions that is most frequently asked about Islam and then give an answer with respect to it. Now the question that we want to look at today is, was the Quran, the holy book of the Muslims, copied from Jewish and Christian scriptures? One of the issues that is brought up by non-Muslims is that it seems as if the stories that are mentioned in the Quran, the Muslim holy book, in a good number of instances are similar to those mentioned in Jewish and Christian scriptures, right? For example, the stories of the prophets. You look at the creation of Adam and Eve. You look at Noah and the flood. You look at Moses and Pharaoh, for example, right? Although they're not exactly the same, some of the same events are involved and the same characters are involved. So one might get the notion that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, somehow copied those stories from the Jewish and Christian scriptures. What is the evidence against this, and why can this not be true? Now, there are a few accusations that are put forth with regards to this claim, and I just want to take a look at two of them, as time does not permit that we look at each and every single one of them. But I would also urge the viewer to do his or her own research on this issue with regards to the various claims, and search and study in an objective manner. So, two of the claims that are put forth that I want to look at today is, number one, that these stories that are mentioned in the Quran were widely known at the time and circulated amongst the people, and thus the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, decided to copy them and compile them and then relate those on. That's one claim. A second claim is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was taught by someone. He had a teacher. So somebody who was knowledgeable in the Jewish or Christian scriptures taught the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and then he in turn took that, compiled it, and then dictated that to the people. Okay, so the first claim that we want to look at is that these stories were widely known at the time and circulated amongst the people, and thus he heard these stories, decided to compile them, right, and then he related those on. Now, the only problem with this is that if you study history, the idolatrous Arabs at the time had no access to this information, right? They didn't have access to it. Now, there was a way that they could have proved that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, was a liar. Now, there's a verse in the Quran that I want to quote. In chapter 12, verse 3, it says, "We relate unto you the most beautiful of narrations, in that we reveal unto you this Quran. Before this, right, you too were amongst those who knew not." Now, so the Quran is claiming here in this verse that it is relating stories that were previously unknown to these people, okay? So, if the people knew these stories, they could have went to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and said, listen, your Quran is stating that we didn't know these stories, but we knew about these stories, so your Quran is lying, right? So if these stories were already known amongst the people and they had access to them, and the Quran is stating that, right, you didn't know about these stories, the people should have came out and said, hey, wait a minute, we knew about these stories, so your Quran is lying. But because the idolatrous Arabs were ignorant of these stories at that time, nobody stepped up and said something like that, right? No one stepped up and said, hey, we knew these stories, we knew about these, counter to what the Quran is stating, right? On top of this, another issue to take note of is that not a single story in the Quran occurs exactly like its biblical counterpart, right? Not a single story occurs exactly like its biblical counterpart. So the stories don't even match. So how can they be plagiarized, right? That's another question. Also, the Quran contains many details that are not found in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, like like the story of Salih and the she-camel, and the people of Ad and Thamud, right? These were stories that are nowhere to be found in the Bible. So, this shows that it was not just blind copying from sources. So these are a few things to take note of with regards to this claim. Now, the second claim is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was taught the Quran by someone, right? He had a teacher who was knowledgeable of the Jewish and Christian scriptures, who taught him the Quran, and then he in turn would relate these to the people. Now, when this claim is made, there are several possibilities that are looked at as far as who this supposed teacher could be. Because if someone were to make this claim that he had a teacher, then the next logical question is who, right? Who taught him? And I was trying to look at a few of the claims that are made. One claim is Buhayra, the Christian monk. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was younger, he went on a trip as a merchant through Syria. And on the way, he had met a Christian monk named Buhayra. And as the story goes, they met, they ate together, and then he left. Right? So he only met him one time. Now, remember that the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 to 24 years. Right? And it is inconceivable that all the teachings of Islam, whether it's prayer, whether it's fasting, whether it's pilgrimage, all of these things were taught to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in one meeting, right? They just sat together, they ate, and then he left. So in one meeting, 23 to 24 years of information was taught to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It's impossible, right? Another possibility that is looked at is Salman the Persian, right? He was one of the most noble and respected companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And he had previous contact with the Zoroastrians and the Christians. Well, the main problem with this claim is that Salman didn't actually meet the Prophet and become a companion, right, until 13 years after the Quran started to be revealed. And by this time, the stories that are similar to the Bible had already been revealed, right? So there's a time gap here that we need to take into account. So again, that cannot be the case. And a third possibility that is looked at is Waraqah ibn Nawfal. And he was a Christian who was knowledgeable in the scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, and he was the uncle of the wife of the Prophet, Khadijah. And when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, first received his revelation, he actually went to meet Waraqah. And Waraqah supported him. And said that, our scriptures are predicting that you're coming. But at the time, he was an old man and he was blind. And after that meeting, he died a few days later. So again, going back to the example of the first, of Buhayra the monk, how could in one meeting Waraqah ibn Nawfal impart 23 to 24 years of information to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him? So, what's put forth in religion? All of its teachings, right? One meeting does not suffice to relay all this information. Okay, so these are just a few of the claims that are put forth about the source of the Quran, or how the Quran was compiled, how it came into existence. Now, even if you prove that the Quran was not copied from Jewish and Christian scriptures, right? That doesn't automatically prove that it was the Word of God, right? There's more studying we need to do. There's other aspects that we have to look at, right? You need to study the Quran, look at its claims, look at its teachings, look at the miracles involved, and so on and so forth, right? And the purpose of this brief session was simply to refute some of those claims that the Quran was either copied or that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had some type of teacher, right? So, I urge the viewer not to take these type of claims about the Quran at face value, right? To do some more research on your own as well with regards to these. To read the Quran for yourself, right? Compare it to the religious book that you believe in and that you read, right? And if you want to learn what the Quran has to say, there's nothing like going to the source itself, right? So pick up a copy, read it for yourself, See what it has to say, right? You're not under any compulsion to accept, right? So I hope I was informative in answering this question about whether the Quran was simply copied or just plagiarized from Christian and Jewish sources. And I'd like to thank you for joining me. Please join me next time when we look at other frequently asked questions about the Islamic faith and then give an answer with respect to those. Thank you and goodbye.